Hi, Henk Akkermans here. Supply Network Dynamics Chapter 3, Part 10, Strategy Filters. So we've had by now many filters, many layers around the perfect decision, cognitive, behavioral, organizational. And even if all those filters are not enough, then you have the problem that often the strategy that people apply, managers apply, entrepreneurs apply, officials apply, is actually counterproductive because they fall into a trap, and we call those decision traps. Let's hope that this mouse doesn't fall into its own decision trap. I deal with three types of those traps. To give you an example, some of the better known examples. Here is a very well known, the capability trap. The capability trap was best described by Nelson Repenning and John Sturman in an article in 2002. And it's really a very nice model of a very fundamental notion. The best way of explaining is the story of that man that was chopping wood and being very tired. And somebody said, hey, you know what, you should really sharpen your axe. Your axe is very blunt. This way it takes you a long time to chop all this wood. Yes, the man said, but I don't have time because I need to chop all the wood, so I have no time to sharpen the axe. And of course it's a bit of a joke, but that's what happens in many organizations. So if you look here, then the problem that this organization has, they have many defects. As a result of the defects, their process throughput is not what it should be. And so there's a gap in throughput. They can do two things. They can work harder or they can work smarter. Now working harder would mean chopping longer, faster. Working smarter would mean sharpening the axe or buying a different axe or putting the wood log in a better position or whatever. Anything that you do that really improves the process. All these things take time. There are delays in there. Delays to improve the process and to get the resources. Delays to do the experimentation. And even then you can have a fundamental improvement of this stock of process problems. Fewer process problems, fewer defects. And of course, when you're really busy, you also make more mistakes. And the mistakes also cost you time. The difficulty with this trap is not just that it exists and people make those mistakes, but also the visibility of what you do for the outside world is very different. So in this case, it's quite clear that you're working hard. But if nothing's happening because you've got your house so very well in order, then what? If you're a firefighter, then you're a hero. But if you've prevented the fire, which is much better and much cheaper and much safer, are you still a hero? My favorite example here is of that public official somewhere in Washington that received a medal and a recommendation because in 2000 he made sure that there was legislation that made it required for commercial airlines to have a bulletproof and closed door between the cockpit and the cabin for the passengers. And as a result of this, there was no 9/11 and there was no big war on terrorism. Of course, that never happened, but suppose that there had been such an official, would he have been successful, or she? Well, quite doubtful, because you know what? Stupid bureaucrats, you know what this costs, and we don't have the technology, and why is this necessary? And all this mingling, let market decide, etc. That would have been a good example of problem prevention, but it may not have been successful. And another, even much more sexy and better title by these authors is nobody ever got credit for fixing problems that never happened. And that's the point, of course. If you do this really well, this firefighting, you're a hero. There's no fires, well, you can't be a hero. Problem with the capability trap. Second type of trap, the experience trap. Two of my highly appreciated fellow researchers, Kishore Sengupta and Luc van Wassenhoven, together with the Grandmaster of Software Project Dynamics, Tariq Abdelhamid. They wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review some years ago, based on the experiments that they did with with indeed experienced project managers, software project managers. And those project managers had to play a game, a sim, as we do also in this course, where they had to they manage a project with the usual delays, time lags, etc., accumulations that you have in any system dynamics representation of a software project. And of course, some of them did pretty good, most of them did not so good. But the most interesting point is that if they played the games multiple times, they didn't learn. They didn't get better at it. And why was that? In debriefing and going through their games, the way they played with those managers, these researchers just mentioned, found that they kept using the same simple heuristics that they had been using in the beginning. Those heuristics they often found had developed early on in the career when they're still managing simple projects. But now in these complex projects, it was very hard for them to learn. Because, hey, you do something here in the beginning, and in the end, 100 time periods later, there's a result. So what was it that I did in the beginning that was successful in the end? Or was it really counterproductive, or did it make a difference, or was there a combination? It's very difficult to derive from those complex settings where cause and effect are distant in time and place and interrelated, and non-linear and all these other words, to make sense of this. So they really stuck to what they knew and what they learned 20, 30 years earlier on. Like, for instance, if a project is late, you put extra people on it. Well, that's not always the best idea, especially if it's rather late in the project, late stage in the project. This is called Brooks' law, and it's a common law in software project development, and Tarek Abdelhamid also mentions it in his earlier work. So actually that can be counterproductive because those new people have to be trained, they have lower productivity, they have communication problems, etc. And that simply distracts the experienced people that have to solve the problems. Here's one example by Dilbert of a very powerful heuristic that may work excellent if you have a project of 3 man-days, but not of 300 man-days. You can't have 9 women deliver a baby in 1 month. So that's the experience trap. The third type of trap is still in the making, no famous publications there. It's one of my own research, and some of my research in telecom service supply chains leads me to believe there's something like a service ramp-up. This is work with Roel van Oers and Chris Vos. In such a service ramp-up, management is tempted to believe that actually it can ramp up and can increase the rate of sales without any constraint, because the work is setting up the service is done by you and me and with computers. So they don't need their own staff to do this, which is different from physical supply chains where ramping up with 20% or 30% is a lot. But here it can be 20,000% or 500%, what do you know? So what I made here is a little model in which management wants to keep the lead time of the new order rate at acceptable level. Acceptable is, say, 2.5 weeks. And when it becomes higher, then they ramp down their service. But when it becomes lower than that, then they try to increase the new sales rate with 5 times what it had been recently. And they can do this with outbound sales, etc. So this is a perceived lead time. Then you get a very sharp increase in the target sales rate. And that is then also put into the backlog. The backlog here you see a very impressive order rate, and you can put those orders in the system, and those service supply chains manage to do so. You just can't get it properly out of the system. The backlog of orders very much increases as well. As a result of that, the workload in those order supply chains also increases very much. And when you increase the workload very much, people start making many more mistakes. So the quality of the work here drops as the workload increases. The number of flawless errors also vastly decreases. All those errors that are not all those orders that are not error-free, they have to be corrected by people. That's manual rework. And that's much more capacity consuming than is the normal work. So there are also very high spikes in rework backlog that takes longer, so the lead time increases. And here you see the current lead time, and those current lead times over time are perceived by management, who then pull the brakes in full and wait until till the situation is back in control, only to give full throttle and blast forward again. I've also called this the Echternach hopping procession, so 2 or 3 steps forward, 1 2 steps back, and that this type of behavior I've seen repeatedly, and this model replicates that quite nicely. Meanwhile, the capacity, the capacity does increase the workforce, but too late, and over time you do get an increase in the customer base. The red line suggests what if you would do that more smoothly, so not have a very high speed, but yeah, that's not what people normally do. So here's a ramp-up trap. Thinking that you can ramp up very rapidly actually lowers your ramp-up speed. My late mentor in System Dynamics, Ned Maas, once wrote an article called Going Slow to Go Fast, and that's really what we have here also. So that's yet another strategy filter, the service ramp-up trap.